Good morning, trustees, presidents, administrators, and students. Welcome to the 2022 Community College National Legislative Summit. I'm Jim Cooksey, chair of the ACCT Board of Directors and a trustee of Moberly Area Community College in Missouri. That's for the Missouri people. I would like to take a moment before we begin the National Legislative Summit program to thank you all for making the effort to be here with us and supporting the community college mission. We haven't seen each other live in person in Washington, D.C. since 2020, and we're all excited to be back. With that, we have a lot of work to do, and we have a lot of work to accomplish this week and during the rest of the year. We must continue to advocate for our institutions and work with our legislators to ensure that community colleges receive the support we need and deserve. So again, thank you for being a part of this vital process. Before beginning today's session, I have some announcements to make. ACCT has a mobile app to assist NLS attendees. Now, I understand personally it takes a little more longer than some, but I was able to accomplish that. It's very simple. If you have not already downloaded the app to your phone or tablet, I encourage you to do so. You can download it free from the Apple or Android App Store. Just search for Community College Trustees and look for our blue and white logo. If you need assistance with the app, find an ACCT staff member. Please don't be hesitant about asking for help. It's really a convenience. As a reminder, everyone here should be wearing a face mask in compliance with the Washington, D.C.'s indoor mask mandate. And at the conclusion of this first session, we should all have our coffee drank by 8:35 and our food eaten and our mask on. Let me be clear about that. I'm trying to use my judicial people skills here. So please adhere to this policy. Definitely, please. You may notice that I am not wearing a mask at the present because the exception to the rule is that speakers on stage are exempt from the mask mandate because of safe socially distancing. However, all presenters in smaller sessions will be required to wear a mask as well. Masks may be removed in the ballroom only while eating and drinking during meal times or this morning before 8:35, if you're eating and drinking. Thank you all, and I thank you really, for complying with our COVID-19 safety policies. We want to ensure that all of us remain well during our visits and after we return home. It is now my pleasure to welcome to the stage and to the podium Jay Nardini, who will be introducing our speaker. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jim, for that introduction. I'm Jay Nardini, Vice Chair of the ACCT Board of Directors and a trustee at Hawkeye Community College in Iowa. I was expecting the Iowa delegation to cheer there, but I guess it is early in the morning, I understand that. Before we begin, as a courtesy to all attendees, please ensure that all cell phones are turned off or silenced. It's now my pleasure to introduce our speaker. Ricardo De Torres joined the National Student Clearinghouse as its CEO and president in 2008. The Clearinghouse, a nonprofit organization founded in 1993, is the nation's most trusted source for enrollment and degree verification. Its members include more than 3,300 U.S. colleges and universities. Ricardo is a board member of the John Tyler Community College Foundation, as well as the board of Achieve the Dream. In 2013, the Washington Business Journal named him the Minority Business Leader of the Year. He has an MBA in International Finance from Georgetown University and an undergraduate degrees in both marketing and management from Manhattan College. Please join me in welcoming Rick Torres.
Okay, so I think they're in the process of getting these slides up, so thank you. I'd like to thank Ji-Hang for the invitation to come here and speak with all of you. Like many of you, this is my first public presentation in over 2 years. I was so used to these screens that it's amazing to see people out here. Well, a lot's happened in the last 2 years, and today's conversation is going to be about the changes that have occurred in enrollments that have been just accelerating. So this is not something new. If you go back to the enrollment numbers back in 2010, it was certainly a very different story in 2009 to where we are today. But there's a lot more going on now that are accelerants to what's happening. And what you're going to see is an overview of the many different ways that enrollments are dissipating from schools, but then also what is happening in the field. Where are all these people going? And the Clearinghouse happens to be engaged in a lot of these activities. So as a matter of going through these presentations are going to be available for you if you need it afterwards, so I am not going to dwell on the numbers. When they told me I was going to start at 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm like, you have got to be joking, okay? So don't get focused on the numbers. It's the message that's on the slide, and many of these are bar slides, so you'll just get orders of magnitude, and that is what matters here, the changes in orders of magnitude. So with that, we'll get going. So what is the National Student Clearinghouse? Well, we are a national nonprofit data company that was founded in 1993. We're in our 29th year. And we have been working with schools across the United States. We work with institutions that enroll 98% of the enrollment of the country. Whoop, I think we just lost the, there we go. Whoop, going back and forth. 19,000 high schools where we get high school diplomas. And we have data sharing arrangements with every state in the country, Puerto Rico, the District of Columbia, and really, to put this in perspective, when you have 98% of the enrollment of the country coming into your system, as well as diplomas and degrees, you have a comprehensive data set at that point. And this data comes in daily, so it's very fresh. Many of you have probably read a lot of our reports over the last couple of years that have been really reflecting what's been going on. So the other thing I'd like to explain to folks is, well, how does a nonprofit, which, by the way, no one is obligated to send us data, get this access to this much information? And it's a very simple process that starts at 11 o'clock, and I'm going counterclockwise on the slide. So the data provider sends enrollment and degree data to the Clearinghouse. We, over the course of 28 and 29 years, have found relevant ways to make that very important data useful back to the schools, serving the learners, doing activities that are enabling to the learners. It starts out with compliance reporting. Most of you may not know, but 98% of the National Student Loan Data System dataset comes from us. So we get the data from the schools, we merge it. Last year we found 9 million errors in the data. So we clean that data up, then it finally gets merged with the Department of Education systems. We do verifications, a lot of work on accountability, measuring student outcomes, students that transfer from community colleges, how many go on to another four-year school, how many complete, how many stop out, how many come back. We work with entities like Achieving the Dream, the National College Attainment Network, and thousands of ed orgs trying to help learners do better. So there's a lot of work that's going on, and later on in the presentation we'll talk about some of the work that we're doing with the Census Bureau and the IRS around ROIs of workforce credentials, non-credit education combined with for-credit education, and what kind of outcomes that yields from a wage gain standpoint. So on to the next. So let's talk about what's going on out there. I love this headline from the Chronicle on January 20th of Higher Ed. You know, and when I first came to the clearinghouse in 08, they told me the higher ed sector moves like someone trying to get across a vat of molasses, right? And you know, you just keep moving, and eventually, you know, you make it to the other side. Well, folks, things are moving very fast, and you know, I think the Cron is hitting it, you know, on here. It's, you know, should it be more of a revolution than an evolution? And you can read their quote, you know, regarding some of the reporting that we've done, saying that, you know, there needs to be a big transformation, a very intentional transformation about how we approach education. And for those that, I've been a big fan of community college. So back in 2000, I was working with Capital One, and that's when I joined the Foundation Board of John Tyler in Richmond. So I was in a very different capacity and fell in love with the community college model. I thought it was just, I think it's the best thing this country, one of the best things this country has to offer. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's gone on with enrollments. A lot of you have read bits and pieces. This is a national view, and I'm going to break it down. And then we're going to look at some of the correlative factors that have played into that, and then kind of what's happening out there. The clearinghouse, because of our breadth of coverage, has been involved in a lot of different conversations about what's happening. All right, so like I said, do not try to get too focused on numbers. Really, just it's about what's on the slides. And I will, for the interest of time, there's a couple of summary slides here that I'm just going to skip past because this will be made available to everyone, and you will have already seen the content of the summary, so there's no need to go through that. Well, first thing you have to look at in this slide, if you look at the gray bars, that is the change in overall enrollments. Right, immediate fall enrollments of kids coming out of high school between 2018 and 2019. It declined by 1.5%. COVID hits, it's down 6.8%. But that's not the story. That's part of the story. It's what's happening underneath. This disparate impact, high poverty versus low poverty, low income versus high income, the bar, that's all you need to see. And you know that there was a disparate impact with this information. And then when you look at the minority levels, you have high minority versus low minority, you can see the disparate impact here as well. So right away, you know that COVID did have a disparate impact on certain populations' first access into college in the fall enrollments. Everybody said, well, this is because, you know, a lot of students took a gap year. Well, guess what? This chart right here says, nope, it isn't true. So what you have here on this slide, just to kind of give you a sense, the class of 2018, what kind of a gap year? Did they enroll in the fall of 2018, or did they wait till 2019? The class of 2019, did they enroll in 2019, or did they come back, you know, the following year, right? So what you have here are the percentage of students who actually took a year off, and what you see is that the numbers didn't change very much. So this is, again, through fall of 2021. This is current data coming into the clearinghouse system. So the gap year is not what happened here. Overall, as I mentioned, declines have been really over time. You can see the numbers for the entire higher ed sector, but when you break it down, it becomes a little more pronounced. You begin looking at the public four-year sector, which is the second grouping from the left, gained actually 0.2% in 2020. Whereas you can see the public two-year sector taking the 10.1% hit. You see the private for-profits with a 5.3% gain, right, in 2020. So this is during COVID, right? So that, you know, you start getting some head scratching, and when you get into the data, you'll see why that happened in a second. So again, I promised you a few number slides, not to get too focused on it, but I do want to make one small change, one small note about the numbers that you're about to see. So the clearinghouse is classifying public 2 years as schools that are classified as public 2 years according to the IPED's, you know, numbers and submissions. But we all know that there's a bunch of us that are offering 4-year degrees, so what I've done is kind of given you a sense of those enrollments in the lower left-hand corner in the fall of 2021. So that actually gets the total public community college number to 4.994 million, right? So there's a little bit of a 10% piece I just want to put in here, a little bit less than 10%, so that as you're looking at this other data, you can see what's happening. Now, it really doesn't change the story very much. So the first thing you want to know is what happened to all these learners. Well, look at fall 2020, and this is broken out. I have all the sectors, but I have all ages, 24 or younger, or over the age of 24. And right away, you see that it's all in the over 24 population. That's a huge driver. And in the community colleges, it really took a hit. Now, again, the for-profit sector was up 47% in the over 24-year-old category. So what is it that they were offering, right, that somehow people felt they could go to the for-profit sector and pick it up that they couldn't get at the community colleges? Very interesting. Next, when you looking at it from 18 to 24 and then over the age of 24 and under 18, what you actually see in the first line there, I think, is that dual enrollment, did pretty well, all right? So, it's alive and well. And then what you see here in the 18 to 24, again, looking at fall 2020, big drops, and the over 24 population, large drops again. Men. So here you see the data that says what happened to all the men. And the drops are precipitous in all the categories, except the private 4 years, interestingly enough, where they had a gain, but not nearly as much as the women. But the public 2-year sector was down 15%. So you start getting a profile of what is happening. You have over the age of 24, you have men, right? Just a lot of enrollments that you were used to seeing, you're not seeing them. On top of all that, the community colleges historically have been a great source of transfer, right? People transfer all the time. And now let's look at what happened to transfers. And so aside from the first-time students dropping by 10% in 2020, folks that were continuing their education and they were transferring, that declined by 3%, and stop-outs coming down, stop-outs that come back also went down by 8%. So stop-outs that would normally say, oh, let me re-enroll for something here, that declined, with very little recovery in 2021. This is really the eye-popping chart. So again, what you're looking at is the percentage change from the previous year, and in 2020, the lateral transfers of students that were persisting was down 26%. Returning students down 15%. Reverse transfer. Everybody was really, wow, this is down 23%, right? So this really shows, and then in 2021, for the fall of 2021, hardly any recovery from that level. So even the transfers that we were used to seeing in the community college sector stopped happening the way we usually saw them happening. So that's really important. Not only is it traditional age learners, where are the adults and where are the transfers? Right, so that you're getting hit from every angle, right? So the sector really, really took it on the chin. So, when you unpack some of this, I came across this really interesting paper by the National Bureau of Economic Research. And what they said, it's really interesting, you can read this, but they were talking about the programs of assembly, repair, maintenance. All of those really got hit very hard, and that explains some of the disappearance of males, in particular from the community colleges. So we took a look at least how are those programs really affected. Remember, the enrollments declined by 10%, right, overall? Well, here you can see the categories. The first one is Homeland Security, Law Enforcement, Firefighting, Related Protective Services, down 14%. If you go down to the fourth one, Mechanic and Repair Technologies and Technicians, down 16%. Precision Production, down a couple of more lines, 18.4%. This is not a big surprise. And for community colleges that are focused on these types of programs, they took significant hits. And if you go to the fall of 2021, you can see that in physical sciences, and again, Homeland Security, law enforcement, those declines continued, right? So, this is really a story about, where are people going and what programs are getting the hardest hit. Needless to say, one of the top programs that changed was liberal arts, where the enrollment went down 12% in fall of 2020, another 5% in 2021. But then you look at computer services, it was down 4.2% and then up 2.9%. And that's one of the areas of opportunity, there's no question, right? If you look at technology and what's happening in there, healthcare is another one that has a lot of growth. But we'll be talking about that in a minute. So what is happening out there? So when you really look at the landscape, what's happening? Well, there's an entity out there called Credential Engine. And we look at Credential Engine, they've published this statistic. There's an explosion of job-worthy credentials appearing in the marketplace. Most of it outside of traditional higher ed. So who's doing the training? Look at the highlighted sentence there. Non-academic providers have nearly 550,000 badges, course completion certificates, licenses, certifications, and apprenticeships. So you say, well, is this the enemy, or do I have to find a way to work and blend myself into the programs that people are flocking to? And how do I, as a community college, evolve what we offer to be able to fit into some of the workforce credentials and certificates that are being offered here that have workforce value? Credential Engine is lining up in many states a K-20 workforce data advocacy effort in order to enable easier job visualizations to learners. This is going to be based on skills. They're looking at, here are the jobs, here are the big skill clusters that are out there, and how do you begin to link from early childhood all the way to the workforce to get pathways moving? And you can see the coalitions that are coming together here on this list. And again, this presentation will be available for all of you. The point I'm making here is this is happening in many states, right, where this effort is underway, because there's job shortages everywhere. And that's really one of the most important things you need to realize, is that what's different this time is that industry is stepping up to the plate and driving it. They're short. You see the headlines. IBM last year hired 15,000 workers in the United States, no post-secondary needed. It was high school diploma and technical training, period. And welcome to IBM. I mean, you talk about changing the paradigm, right? And business not as usual, but a lot of companies are doing this. All right, so you need to begin to think about, gosh, is it ever going to come back to the way it was? No, it is not. It is not, right? And the evidence is all there. We are in countless conversations as the clearinghouse in multiple states where these types of pathways is all everyone is talking about, right? And let's understand, this is the road to the future, right? This is what's happening. Titan Partners put out a list of an example of a continuum of full-service online boot camps and specialists and who they're partnering with. Right, this is just one sector in technology. Right, begin to look at all of these different folks in the middle that are providing training and development, and some of them are partnering with universities and schools. So my point is that it's a different environment out there. Right, do you partner and collaborate with others? Is this the opportunity that we're talking about here? Right, how do you begin to look at the pipeline differently and the role of community colleges differently? It's funny, I finished this presentation, the first round of it, and I handed it off on Thursday, and then of course Friday shows up, and I had them put a red line around these two comments to push for, short form credential attainment and support, and Pell, right? Well, we got some good news on Friday, all right? Let's see, right? I mean, that's great. But, in addition to that, I would say the other points on this slide matter. Tightening the collaboration with industry, because there's a demand. right? There's an absolute demand, and community colleges are an absolute font for supply and can be, all right? But you've got to step into the game. Become heavily involved in your state efforts to identify high demand skill clusters and understand what's in there. Credential Engine, very interestingly, they have a credential, right, workforce credential, and underneath it, they have all the skills that are needed for that, right? And it's put, by many times, that information is provided by other schools. So you can look at your programs and say, okay, I want to get into this industry, right? Here are the workforce credentials. Do I have the curriculum? Do I have the training at my school to actually deliver this? So again, something to keep in mind, actions you can take going forward. So what can the sector do to help itself? And I think this is a really important piece here. So there are tools out there. I'm starting out with a quote from Kevin Drum, who's the president of SUNY Broome, and where he says, you know, done right, non-credit education can not only help maintain enrollment rates, but keep lifelong learners at the institution. So stickiness, and he gave a bunch of examples that were going on in his institution, but I kind of broke it down and I said, you know, what does this mean to me? I said, well, for those schools that are focused on traditional transfers to four-year schools, and that's what you do, you got to keep doing that. But you got to find more learners, and we'll get to that in a second. 1 and 2 year certs, degrees for jobs, sure, there's demand for that as well, so you don't stop that. But you really got to look at what it means to provide continuing education. Are there different ways to do that? Collaborations, right? How do you begin to become that engine within your own community that creates pipelines? And of course, short-form credentials for traditional age and adults. So both of these are ways to move forward, right? But you have to be very intentional about doing this. You know, the Urban Institute also came out with some work, and they were talking about what COVID has done to what used to be on-prem learning. So remember back when I was talking about those ARM courses and the big declines? Well, a lot of you actually have developed hybrid models. And what they're saying here now, if you read the bottom, the impetus to develop these new technologies eventually can bend the cost curve of providing the training, right? So you have to pick which are the training areas that you'd like to focus on, but the point is, COVID is actually creating opportunity, right? And because you've had to change the way you were approaching your education. Now, stop-outs. This is something that we at the Clearinghouse know a lot about because you've been tracking students for 28 years. Turns out that this is a report that we reissued in 2018, and we are reissuing it this spring. So we're going to refresh all of this data this spring. It's called Some College, No Credential, with a very generous donation from Lumina. We're going to be providing this research. This was from 2018. I expect the numbers are just going to go up from there. 36 million Americans had some post-secondary education training, but no completion, and they're no longer enrolled. They're your stop-outs. 10% of that population, it's actually a little bit higher than that, almost 11, are potential completers. And what does that mean? They had 2 full academic years under their belt, right, with no completion to show for it. 0. 2 full years. They may have gone part-time, 5 years in a row or whatever, but they had 2 full years. About 940,000 students identified when we first did this in 2013, re-enrolled and are now new completers. And more than 1 million are still enrolled when we first did this report in 2018. So there's a huge chunk of this population that re-engages with education. These are all, and we'll get to who they are in a second. Returning students were more likely to have re-enrolled at public institutions, most of them. But people that went online went back to online. So they were very dedicated to the online environment. And completers tended to finish at the institution and the state where they first enrolled. So why is that relevant? Well, we kind of have that information. Matter of fact, most of your schools have a free service that they use from the Clearinghouse called Student Tracker. And the main thing they do with it is they say, how many of my learners that I no longer have contact with are still enrolled somewhere, and how many of them stopped? All of your schools use this service, and it's free. All right, so I'm not, it's there. It's there for you. So let's look at a profile of who these people are. So the blue bar indicates their age from the last enrollment. So what you'll see is 75% of the people that stop out, 47% are 23 and younger, and there's another 28% that are between 24 and 29. So now let's get to the more important question. Where are they now? What's the available pool? Well, there you go. 77% are between the ages of 24 and 39. You want to bring adult learners back in? You want to get them to upskill, reskill, right? This is a target that's very ripe, right? And they've got a lot of already post-secondary education in their background, right? So this is an important population, and being proactive about getting to them would be a huge opportunity. I became aware of this project between the American Association of School Administrators and AACC, which I thought was fantastic. So they bring these school district leaders together, these superintendents and community college presidents, and they're saying, listen, we have to do more than just dual enrollment. Dual enrollment's great, right? But we have to figure out a way to cut down on the remedial rates of kids coming out of high school. And the way to do that is to collaborate with the community college and start working with these students in their sophomore, junior, and senior years of high school. And in some cases, I had heard anecdotally that the remedial rates had come down almost 75%. That translates to enrollments, that it translates to some, it's just a whole different model. But it implies a K-14 view of the world, right? And I have a quote from Dan Domenech here, who's the head of the AASA, that says part of the problem, and we're in DC now, you've got two sets of funding laws that work against this continuum, right? How do we change that conversation? It's a huge opportunity. How do we change that conversation? The days of, K-12 and then lobbing it over the wall to post-secondary, we have to change that narrative if we're going to actually change the pipeline, especially coming out of our younger folks. I wanted to give you a quick update on a project that we're working on. Let me check the time real quick here. Okay, I'm on schedule. I have somebody actually designated to give me the hook at the appropriate time. So the project that we're working on, industry credentials, this is how it works. The clearinghouse, as I said, receives all kinds of data from colleges and states. We also are now getting workforce credentials. One example is the National Association of Manufacturers. We've got welding, MSSC, National Institute of Metalworking Skills. We also have a collaboration with the Census Bureau and the IRS. So now you see where this is going. We get the results of that commingling of not-for-credit, credit, and workforce credential with, guess what? Average wages attached to the smallest group possible so you can't identify the person. And then those results go back in aggregate to each of the data providers. So you get things like this for MSSC. It turns out that 86% of people that earned an MSSC credential had no degree whatsoever. And it turns out that cut it down even further, almost 58% of their credential earners had no post-secondary enrollment whatsoever. So now all of a sudden it's opening the eyes of what the pathways are to these types of credentials. Really important to understand. Is there an opportunity here? This is why this work is so important. And on top of that, and I have to put my usual disclaimer from the Census Bureau anytime I show data that's sourced from them. There it is. But we can also do ROIs and breakdowns based on years since last credential by race, ethnicity, gender, and industry. So on the left, you see, white manufacturing, black in manufacturing, Hispanic. On the top side, on the bottom side, what happens if you got the certification and chose not to go into manufacturing and you stayed in a different industry, right? So it basically shows the gaps. This is very important information, and believe me, the workforce credential issuers care about this. They really do. And what we see is that this is the future. As you look at accountability measures into the future, this is where it's going, and lo and behold, all right, I added this slide on Saturday. What caught my eye were some of the requirements. a wage increase of 20% for those completing a program approximately 6 months after completion. Well, you got to measure that, right? And you got to have tools to measure that. And just because they earned a credential in this state doesn't mean that they're going to be exclusively employed in that state. So you really got to be thinking in a national way about how you begin to, get that wage data, which is why I mentioned the work that we're doing in the previous slide. And obviously, there's a whole non-credit program that you can articulate into credit courses that can otherwise qualify to become eligible for Pell. So who knows if those requirements will change, right? But just based on what you see right now, you can see why it's important to be able to link these things together and how ROI is going to become an important part of the discussion as we move into the future. So the Clearinghouse has been involved with the Learning and Employment Record, and it's a tool that enables pipelines. So if you think about the pipeline of transitions that happen in your lifetime, you go school to school, school to business, business to business, and business back to school. And what this is all about is taking the skills and being able to get them to translate and transport from one transition to the next as you're growing your skills and knowledge. And here's a short video.
Many of us, no matter how much we have accomplished or learned, struggle to communicate our strengths and our skills. And none of us has a complete picture of what opportunities we are qualified for, or what opportunities could be right around the corner with just a bit more experience or training. The Indiana Achievement Wallet is a digital wallet or profile that tracks your learning achievements, helps you share those achievements with others, and helps you connect what you can do with available job opportunities. The Indiana Achievement Wallet can uncover the skills you've gained throughout life, from jobs, school, military, everywhere. You can explore how these achievements have prepared you for a particular job, and you can understand what skills or learning you may still need to gain. The Indiana Achievement Wallet can help you plan for the career you want. Everything on the Indiana Achievement Wallet is verified. That means when an employer asks you for your resume, diploma, degree, certification, or occupational license, or where you learned a skill, you have digital proof that you can easily share. Just like a resume, you can personalize this information, providing the best version of yourself for a new opportunity. And perhaps most importantly, you can find open jobs for which you qualify based on your skills and credentials. And employers can even find you. The Indiana Achievement Wallet empowers learners to show what they know, get meaningful jobs, and pursue satisfying careers.
So this is an example of just one of the many efforts going on. This one we're involved with in the state of Indiana. You may be aware of the Department of Commerce grants, Good Jobs Grant, $25 million per grant, and again, tied to jobs. So again, you'll have this as a reference. I'll end with a final thought here. Non-credit education, workforce development, and credential issuance is coming of age, and this is happening very quickly. As an industry, you need to work together to move away from only traditional FTE measures as a yardstick for value and success. It's antiquated. The community college sector has a broader, larger story to tell. I really firmly believe this. It is a force for learner and worker enablement. But you have to be proactive and be willing to measure. And that's going to be the key to evolving the sector en masse to its full potential. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick, for those interesting presentation and statistics, and I'm sure everyone here is going to be reviewing your PowerPoint and taking that all to heart as they go back home. So we're going to have some time to take some questions for Mr. Torres. There are two microphones at the center aisle. There's one up front, one further back. If you do have a question for him, please go to a microphone, and we will start with whoever gets to the mic first, which looks like perhaps Raisa back there. And then we'll alternate between the microphones as long as we have someone at each microphone. So, Reza, we'll start with you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you, Mr. Torres. Wonderful, enlightening, and very insightful presentation. I have a question for you again regarding to what you covered. One element I felt that has not been covered, I'm sure you have more insights on that side, and that is the innovation entrepreneurship. Because as you know, again, there's a lot of activities happening at the four-year colleges, but two-year colleges can have a potential, and they have a potential of providing resources for entrepreneurship and innovation that can create, again, another engine, if you will. By the way, I did my doctorate degree at Indiana University in Instructional Systems Technology. Thank you.
All right, so I want to make sure I understood. I just wanted to make sure I understood the question. Was it about the apprenticeships and the coverage of those, or?
Innovation and entrepreneurship.
Oh, okay, so entrepreneurship.
Yes.
So I think we don't have data that focuses, if we're trying to link programs now that focus on entrepreneurship and that lead to credentials that, I want to make sure I get the context of your question correctly, so I'm not clear on the context. Can you clarify, like, do we have data that supports that?
Well, the data that supports that innovation and entrepreneurship creates a new category of jobs.
Yes, it does.
That again, even if you do a credential, you want to start your own business. When you start your own business, you create more jobs. Kind of a exponential effect that entrepreneurship has when you start taking one credential, but instead of working for someone else, you build your own business that you creates more jobs.
Yeah, so what's happening now in some of the work, so now I've got it, thank you.
Okay,
what's happening now is you'll be able to look at the jobs that are becoming available in your region. And within those regions, new platforms are coming out that can disaggregate the skills and that are necessary for these, especially the new types of skills, entrepreneurial skills. What do those mean? And you'll be able to see some of the underlying skill sets that determine what entrepreneurialism is, and those are available. So if you go to a place like Credential Engine, you can see some of these skill clusters and the identification of these, and then you can look at jobs that are asking for these and bring these together. So this is all new. This is all developing as we speak, but I think you'll be able to very proactively look at this information and be able to develop pipelines and understand how you have to modify your curriculum to do that.
Okay, next question, front microphone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Torres, for a very engaging and challenging presentation. My question is, towards the end, you talked about measuring and accountability when it comes to these credentials. Are the measurements being driven by the industry, by these non-credit credentialing programs, or higher education? To what extent are all three involved in measuring that?
That's a great question. I think you're finding that, in particular, the ROI question is one that is coming up not only for traditional education, but as schools are moving into more continuing education types of pathways, learners are starting to ask the question. You know, you've seen this big question, what's the value of higher education? Well, this is beginning to really get the learner focused, and the adult learner in particular, how much time and money am I going to spend on a course, and what is this going to yield me as I go into the future? So I think there is a clear intentionality that we're seeing about learners asking this question and about training institutes, whether it's a school or a boot camp, being able to say, it's going to cost you X, and here's your wage yield. So here's the value that I'm going to create for you. And that's going to become part of the narrative. I mean, we see it happening right now. And that's exactly what's happening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next question, back Mike.
Yes, thank you for all this data and information. I wanted to look again at what we designate as some college, no degree sector. And certainly our institution is looking to that sector as a way to serve our communities and address our enrollment problems. I'm wondering if you have data on the student debt that these individuals have accrued, and it would seem that having a recognition of how much money people are owing would enable us to develop some programs to relieve that debt as some kind of reward for returning to school. Thank you.
Well, that's a great observation because getting students to come back requires some wraparound services. And one of them is understanding debt load, but also their current family situation. And is there supports that can be put in place to help them, get back to getting their education so that they can complete, whatever it is that they choose to do. So, and I think as part of the outreach process to potential completers, this is one of the first things that schools need to do, right, is to understand what their circumstances are. And that information can be provided if the learner says it's okay, right? So the learner's got to be able to say, yep, I do need some help. I'm happy to come back, but I need help, and here's how you can help me. And then having wraparound services available for these learners in anticipation of what you think they're going to come back with, I think would be very important. So I think that's a terrific observation.
Thank you. Do we have sources for that data, or is it protected?
In some states, they're doing it better than others, and I think we're in the middle of trying to figure out how we can put that all together in a hub where information can become available. So again, these are all new services that are coming out, right, to be able to help learners reconnect and help schools reconnect. But more to come on that. So yes, and I think from your comment right now, there's a need. There's no question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
Good morning. I am a very proud board member for Northern Virginia Community College, state of Virginia. My name is Sadiq Sheikh. And also very proud American. I want to know about international, between the national colleges and international, where our students are learning and going, and where the international community, we had a lot of students coming to the United States of America because we are the country in the world, best education. And I must say, my feeling is these community college are doing better job than the Ivy League colleges, because all those students are going to the 4.0 plus, and we take and build them for our future. So I want to know where the international students and national students are.
So great point, and I agree with what you've said. One of the we had a delegation come in from China about 3 years ago, 3 to 4 years ago, to look at, the post-secondary system. And one of the things that I think the community college sector in general struggles with is recognition in the international community as a true academic pathway to a 4-year degree. So the example I would give, since you're from Northern Virginia Community College, a student takes 2 years at Nova, completes, gets an associate's degree. Let's make believe it's a student from somewhere in Europe or China, whatever. That gets recognized as a technical degree, right? And it's not a university, you're not on the university path. If that same student transfers to George Mason University, completes a 4-year degree, all of a sudden, the whole experience gets translated to a validated university credential. So part of the problem, and I think and the opportunity for community colleges, is to reposition themselves in the international community as a conduit, a legitimate conduit to an academic degree in the United States. Because I think that is at the heart, that is one of the bigger issues that's out there that I've seen.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Next question, back microphone.
Hi there. Thank you so much for the data. My name is Austin Folding. I'm from Oregon and Lane Community College. I'm trying to make an argument that obviously these certificate programs, especially the ones from non-educational institutions, there's a guarantee of employment afterwards with many of them. It could be with a private employer or within certain industries because there's such a high need, and that's less formal. So I guess, are you collecting data around certificate programs, badges, licenses, that there's a guarantee of employment afterwards?
So presently, we're not collecting that. That'll be what will be coming, because as we're getting more integrated with some of these issuers, this is exactly what they want to know, right? They want to know if they're working in the industry, Did they get a job in the industry? Similar to the manufacturing slide I showed up there, where we showed that they were working in manufacturing or not. It's the same type of outcome. So my guess is we're at the beginning stages of being able to do that, but that's going to be part of the growing ecosystem of information.
And just to be clear, a certificate program where it's like built in that there's a guarantee of employment afterwards, whether with a certain company or a cluster of companies. Does that make sense?
What? Okay, say that again.
Oh,
please?
yeah. So essentially, it's built into the certificate program that there's a guarantee of employment afterwards.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. In case you wonder where all those people are going, they're going backstage for a photo op with the First Lady when she arrives. Next question, front microphone.
I'm Herlinda Chico. I'm the Vice President of the Board of Trustees for Long Beach City College.
Okay, chatter down. We can't hear this young lady.
Thank you for the young part. I appreciate that. I'll be 49 in July, so I appreciate that. So I'm Herlinda Chico. I'm the Vice President of the Board of Trustees at Long Beach City College in Southern California. And you mentioned when collecting data that you used Census, there was a collaboration with Census. So I'd like a little bit more explanation with that, because we know that in the census there are many communities, particularly immigrant communities, that are undercounted. So can you explain a little bit how that data was used?
Great point. So the Census and IRS information, the Census actually manages a database called the LEHD database. And those are UI wages that are submitted by the states on a quarterly basis usually. So what we're able to do is to take credentials, and we don't use Social Security number at all, but we're able to match credentials, learners with either IRS or UI data. And then when that data comes back to us, we actually get it in clusters, right? So we don't see how much Rick Torres is earning, but it's in, so the IRS and the UI Census Bureau make sure that it's in aggregated clusters that are identifiable by credential but not by individual. So that is how we leverage the census. It's really on the management of the LEHD database.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one more question, so I know, I'm sorry, sir. Back mic, please.
Mm-hmm. Hi, thank you. My name is Melissa Littleton. I'm the student body president at Tacoma Community College. And thank you. Appreciate that. So in your slides, I noticed that you had mentioned manufacturing, and I really appreciated some of the content you brought about industries starting to train employees themselves. I've seen this trend with Microsoft for the last few years, but manufacturing was not on my radar. And so I was wondering if that sector is growing post-pandemic. Like, are you expecting there to be more manufacturing jobs once we realize the kind of the breach in the supply chain post-pandemic? And if starting to offer manufacturing degrees would be beneficial, or is it regional?
Well, thank you for the question, first of all, and thank you for coming here. What we're seeing is a big push in advanced manufacturing. And what many of these the entry positions don't require an associate's, but there are many advanced manufacturing credentials where the recipients have associate's degrees, bachelor's degrees, and in some cases a master's degree, and they're earning these higher level skills in advanced manufacturing. So it is a perfect example of that swirl I was talking about, where you go to school, business, back to school, and it's just a continuous cycle of experiential learning and academic training. There's no question that the advanced manufacturing field is growing tremendously. I mean, next time you take go to automotive, look at the technology that's involved there. I mean, it's no longer, the vision of what VTech used to be. It's an entirely different world now, and I think you have to explore those, no question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Let's give Mr. Flores another round of applause.
Thank you. Thanks,
And
Jay.
thank you for a very informative presentation and
you.
for taking
My
questions.
pleasure.
With that, we have concluded our question and answer session. We want to thank Mr. Torres again, as we have, and to those in the audience who brought questions. Our next speaker will be on stage shortly. Please stay in your seats. I know. Remember, you must wear your masks. Please stay in your seats, all for security purposes. It'll be a little bit, so you can visit among yourselves.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our program is about to begin.
Excuse me while I remove my mask so my glasses don't fog up. For those of you who came in a little late, I'm Jim Cooksey, chair of ACCT. And it is now my honor to introduce First Lady Jill Biden. Dr. Jill Biden is the First Lady of the United States, a community college educator and best-selling author. Dr. Biden also served as Second Lady of the United States from 2009 to 2017. As Second Lady, Dr. Biden focused on advocating for community colleges, military families, and the education of women and girls around the world. As the Obama-Biden administration focused on recovering from the 2008 economic recession, Dr. Biden worked to underscore the critical role of community colleges in the nation's economy. She hosted the first ever White House summit on community colleges with President Obama and led the Community College to Career bus tour to highlight industry partnerships between community colleges and employers. She also became the honorary chair of the College Promise National Advisory Board, leading the effort to make community colleges free for hard-working students. Following the Obama-Biden administration, then former Vice President Biden and Dr. Biden launched the Biden Foundation and the Biden Cancer Initiative. As First Lady, Dr. Biden continues her work for education, military families, and fighting cancer. She is a professor of writing at Northern Virginia Community College. Please join me in welcoming First Lady of the United States, Dr. Jill Biden.
Hello. Good morning. Hello. Good morning. Thank you. Oh, please. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Cooksey, Jim, and thank you to Dr. Richard Rhodes as well. You know, it's been my privilege to work with ACCT and AACC as Second Lady and now as First Lady. But as a teacher, I want to say on behalf of my colleagues and students just how grateful we are for your leadership. With us today are some of the hardest working and determined advocates for community college. But I want to especially acknowledge the students. And where are you? Could the students stand up? Where are the students? Thank you. I know that, with work and family obligations, on top of your studies, it probably wasn't easy to get here today, but you came because you know that showing up matters. So thank you for using your voice on behalf of your community, and I love that you are here. You know, some of you may know that I'm an enormous sports fan. I'm a first lady for all Americans, but when it comes to teams, my heart belongs to the Philadelphia Eagles, the 76ers, the Phillies, and the Flyers. That must be Philadelphia Community College back there. Oh, gosh, the competition, the crowds, the rivalries, I love it all. But too often, we treat what happens in our nation's capital like a sports game too, wondering which team will score the most points with voters. Legislation becomes a football to keep away from the other side, and Americans get lost in the playbook. Governing isn't a game. There are no teams to root for or against, just people. Americans from all walks of life who need help and hope. There's no scoreboard. There's no us versus them. If someone wins, it doesn't mean someone else has to lose. And most of all, there are no spectators. All of us must do our part because the decisions that are made in the halls of Congress and the rooms of the White House affect us all. You know that. It's why you're here today. You know what's at stake. 1 year ago, I told this group that Joe, my husband Joe, was going to fight for community colleges. And since then, we've made some incredible progress. The American Rescue Plan put billions into community colleges so that they could support their students. Thank you. Through financial aid, child care support, and other wraparound services. I'll take that back to Joe, that you gave him a round of applause for that. The bipartisan infrastructure law passed, creating millions of jobs, along with potential opportunities to train for in-demand skills. But Joe has also had to make compromises. Congress hasn't passed the Build Back Better legislation yet. And free community college is no longer part of that package. We knew that this wasn't going to be easy. Joe always said that. Still, like you, I was disappointed because, like you, these aren't just bills or budgets to me, to you, right? We know what they mean for real people, for our students. And it was a real lesson in human nature that some people just don't get that. We've seen how entire towns can be transformed when community colleges and private companies work together to train students for jobs that are desperately needed, with skills like manufacturing or modernizing our electrical grid. You know, we've seen how fragile that grasp on middle-class life can be, how our students struggle to pay their bills and buy their books. You know, I've already seen that last week in my classroom. You know, I had to loan a student a book because payday didn't occur yet. He had to wait till payday. We know that if we can make that path a little easier with high-speed internet or affordable prescriptions or more Pell Grants, they can actually cross that finish line. We've all had that bright, engaged student, someone who has so much passion and potential, fade from our classes because they can't find a reliable babysitter. I had this last semester, a woman in my class whose child got sick from COVID. She started missing classes. Then, like so many students, they fall behind and they just can't catch up. Or the cost of childcare gets to be too much, and they have to choose between extra shifts at work and pursuing their degree that will help them earn more money. But there's no choice when it comes to keeping your kids safe. And one day, that student is just gone. And it breaks my heart. So we all know that affordable childcare and universal preschool would profoundly change people's lives. Build Back Better isn't just a piece of legislation, and it's certainly not a football to pass or pivot. It's about helping community colleges train our workforce with 21st century skills. It's about supporting students with tutoring and childcare and transportation. It's about pioneering the new climate jobs that will lead us into the future. And it's an investment in our kids with universal preschool that will lay the foundation to learn and succeed for the rest of their lives. No one can tell. You can clap for that. I am so for that. No one can tell that story better than you can. No one can help us push past that playbook and see the human heart that drives our work better than you. Governing does have one thing in common with sports. When you get knocked down, you get back up. When you lose, you work harder and you come back for more. And there are a lot of reasons that I wanted Joe to run for president. But one of the biggest was because I knew that no one would work harder for my students and yours. And I've never believed that more than I do today. Joe doesn't quit. He doesn't give up. He is keeping his promise to rebuild our middle class, and he knows that community colleges do just that. He knows that you are our greatest resource and our best investment. He will keep fighting for us. So thank you for being here. This is how we move forward, step by step. We take the hard-won victories and we keep pushing for the change we need. With work and persistence, we will win the progress that our students deserve. Joe and I are with you. We will continue to work as hard for your community as you do. We are not giving up. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So nice to see you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Biden, for sharing your time and insights with us. And please, one more round of applause as she exits the building.